In this video, I will show you how to take a 360 render done in Cinema 4D using the Spherical Camera and export some 3D data like nulls and cameras into After Effects to facilitate compositing in VR space. Now, this is a 360 video. It is monoscopic, not stereo, but I will expand on this as we go on in further videos. What I'd like you to pay attention to is this is just a 3-second animation where we are going around a kitchen, and we have two elements that have been composited in After Effects. One is this little flare over here, and you can see it's nicely stuck where it needs to be, and the other one is this text that says cupboard, and you can see that it has the proper distortion and it's always in place. And yes, let's begin by taking a quick tour in Cinema 4D, and I'll show you how to set some things up. So here we are inside Cinema 4D, and if I scrub the timeline, you will see that we have that spherical camera that is moving on an ellipse. And what you will see is that we have two cameras, and I'll explain exactly what this is. So let's delete the cameras, and let me tell you what we are trying to do here. So I have this circle object primitive, and I've set it up at 170 centimeters, which is very close to where our eyes are in real life. This kitchen is modeled in proper scale. So I am going to go and create a camera. Now in the camera, I'm going to go to the spherical tab in the Attributes Manager and enable it. We need to have an equirectangular layout, lat long, and use the full range, which is the same as this, but anyhow. So here's our camera, and if we view the world through this camera, you will see that nothing really happens, but if I render, you will see a 360 of the particular view we had. Now, I want to constrain the camera to this ellipse, so I'm going to right click and add an align to spline tag, drag the spline in here, and I'm going to make sure that my camera is zeroed out in the orientation. And if I scrub now, you will see that nothing happens because I need to go and add some keyframes. So I want the camera to go around in 3 seconds. So at frame 0, I want the position to be 0, add a keyframe, and at frame 90, I want it to be 100%, add a keyframe. Now I'm going to right click here, go to my show F curve, because I want to click here, select all, and linearize this so we have a constant speed. If you want it to ease in, ease out, that's up to you. So this is just a looping animation, so I want it to go from 0 to 360 degrees in constant speed. So now if I scrub, you will see that we're going around, always facing in one direction, and when I render this, we'll get a 360 from that camera point of view. So this will be my render camera, and I'm going to explain briefly what the situation is. Now, in some cases, we want the viewer to be the person that's going to choose which way we are looking at. But that means that if we're going around a room, the viewer needs constantly to swivel in their chair in order to focus where the camera is going towards. And when I say towards, I mean now the camera is facing that way, upwards, and if we go this way, we have to face this way. When we're going around, we have to face that way, and so forth. Now, the render camera needs to be fixed orientation. It needs to point in one direction because the orientation is going to be applied inside After Effects, and that is something you need to do only if your camera has animation which turns the rotations. If all your rotations are 0 and your camera always points in the same direction, you don't actually need to do this step, but I'm going to show you the full extent. And if you want to do it, you do. If you don't, you don't. But if your camera is going to be pointing in a particular direction, then you need to do what I'm doing here. So let's go and create a copy of this camera and call it Orientation Camera. Now this is the camera that will give us the 3D data we need inside After Effects. So this is going to provide the render, That's what we're going to render with, and this is going to provide the actual 3D data. So for this to work properly, I need to go here and select tangential. Now when I do this, you will see that when this starts animating, let's go and see where our camera is pointing. I'm going to rewind here. You can see we're looking at this door, and this is the refrigerator. When I activate this camera and move it, you will see it originates right at the same orientation, but it's trying to face towards the direction the camera is moving, and that's why we have that tangential switch on. Great. So if we go to our top view here, you will see that the camera is reorienting itself as it's moving. Fantastic. And if I click on the move, you will see it's the z-axis that's pointing tangentially to our ellipse. And that's very important. So we have these two cameras now. Now, one more thing I've done, just so that I have some reference to put that text I wanted in one of the models. So this is the group of interest. I went and created two, I call those solids because I was doing some experiments. But basically, these are just polygons which I can move around. If I go to my 3D view here and turn off my cameras, I'm going to press S to focus on this object. You can see we have this plane here, and I'm just going to use its 3D data with this external compositing tag, and I'm going to create a null inside After Effects, and just leave it as it is. Just leave the anchor point to center so it coincides with this. And I've added two of these, one for that cupboard and one for this cupboard. So we have these two cupboards. I've only used one, but I'm exporting two just for the fun of it. So we are going to export two nulls and a camera. Oh, I have one more thing here, and that is the sun. So I have another null, which is on the other side. I've aligned it with where the physical sky's sun is, not for any particular reason. I just wanted to put it there. You can put this wherever you want. So let's go to our render camera, and I'm going to render this out and show you exactly what was rendered, and then we are going to move to After Effects to do everything necessary to make these things align properly in 3D 360 space. One more thing I forgot to say is the render settings. So select the render camera, the one that is not orienting itself, the one that's always facing in the same direction, and then go to your render settings. And in the output, I've used just 248 and by 1024 because I wanted my renders to finish fast. You just go and render at the resolution you want your 360 to be that 4K or 8K or whatever you want to do. So I'm exporting all frames at 30 frames per second, and in the save, I'm saving a PNG sequence, and don't forget to untwirl the compositing project file. Activate save, set it to After Effects, and include 3D data. Now normally when we render this, we will get an AEC file which we can import in After Effects. If for any reason something happens and it doesn't save itself, just click on Save Project File and go and save it somewhere where you can find it. The last thing is that in order for After Effects to be able to import that .aec composition, you need to install a plugin that comes free with Cinema 4D. Let me show you where you're going to find that. Inside Cinema 4D's installation folder, there is a folder called Exchange Plugins. Double click on that, go to your After Effects, select Importer, whatever your operating system is, whatever the version After Effects is, and you need to find this zip, C4D importer.zip. Unzip it, so double click to unzip it, and you get this little folder, and you need to copy this importer plugin in the After Effects plugins folder. And inside the After Effects, you will find the plugins folder, and just make sure it's here. Restart After Effects, and then it will be able to open the .aec file. After you're done rendering, you should see your sequence, and in the same folder you will see the file that has the .aec extension. This is what we are going to import in After Effects. Inside After Effects now, there are two very important things you need to do, and those are the following. Go to your Preferences, General, and make sure the Allow Scripts to Write Files and Access Network. You need to click this to be activated. Otherwise, the VR compositing workflow inside After Effects will not work. So I'm going to press OK. And the next thing you need to do is go to the Project Settings in the File menu and make sure in the Video Rendering and Effects that GPU acceleration is enabled. Make sure it's not on Software only. So I put it on Metal and press OK, and we are ready to import that AEC file. So let's click Command I and import it. So in my Renders folder, I will locate the AEC file and open it. Fantastic. And what we need to do is go to this little folder here, and you can see that if I double click, we have all the 3D data. Now here's the problem. A lot of people expect Cinema 4D to do what we are going to do now manually. You can see that we have these solids moving around, but by no means they reside in the positions that we had them. And this tutorial is basically this little detail, how we're going to make these things align. So let me show you exactly what you need to do. First of all, go to the Window menu and go right down here and find the VR Comp Editor. This is included in Adobe After Effects by default. So when this comes up, make sure you dock it somewhere where it's helpful. Great. Now the next thing we need to do, because we are going to create a 3D edit, we want that edit to be the raw rendered footage. So drag your rendered footage on a new composition, and let's click on it, press return, and name it 360 footage. Great. Now I'm going to use this to create my initial 3D edit. So let's go add 3D edit. It's going to ask what one I want to create, and I'm going to use this one, 360 footage. And I can or cannot, I don't really need to use a 2-node camera, although if you do it, it will work. The only problem is when you're navigating, the camera doesn't navigate from its center when you're using a 2-node camera, but from the average point of the orientation, the second node, and the camera itself. Anyway, I would advise you just turn this off. You can always change that. Now, if you're going to use 3D plugins to add effects, it is suggested that you turn this on. We are not going to do that in this case, and that will work in certain circumstances. But for now, I'm going to leave it off. I can turn it on later on. Let's add a 3D edit. Depending on your hardware, it may take a few seconds to complete this. Now, if I scrub here, you will see that now we're actually viewing our 360 as a proper rectilinear projection. This is what you're going to see through your goggles or your Google Cardboard when this whole project is finished. But you're going to have the ability to look around. Now, if I select the camera and go and click on this little button, I can actually look around. So this is you turning your head. Fantastic. So I'm going to leave this as it is. I can go and reset it later on. Now, the problem with this is, number one, we don't have any of the 3D data we exported in here. And number two, we are not following the camera path. So what I need to do is go back to my original composition, the one that came with the .aec file, double click on it, and I need the orientation camera and all my 3D data, so the sun and the two solids. I'm going to copy them from here, and then I'm going to go to my edit. I can click here because here you're going to get a list of all the 3D edits you will create. So if I click here, I'm going to go back to this. Now, paste everything in here and do the following. Number one, bring the master camera on top, because this is going to be the camera we're going to be viewing things from. And After Effects uses the camera which is on top of everything else. Now, the next thing is that I need to orient this camera now to my orientation camera, which includes us moving around the kitchen. So I'm going to pick whip and go and make the camera orientation a parent of the VR master camera. Now we need to reset our orientations. So untwirl, untwirl again, and go and zero out the position. 0, tab 0, tab 0, tab 0, tab 0, tab 0. Make sure all the numbers are 0. Now if I scrub, you will see that not only we can see what we were looking at before, but now there seems to be some sort of proper correlation between our nulls and the 3D scene. Fantastic. Now I'm going to hide the second camera so we don't see that artifact in the middle. And then just to make this a bit more pleasant, I'm going to select my solid, use this little arrow, and I'm going to make this smaller. And if I scrub, I can go here, which is a bit closer, and I'm going to make this nice and small. Go back a few frames and select the other solid and do the same. Just bring it in so it aligns with my cupboard. You don't really need to do that, but I'm doing it just so that you can see that everything is aligned properly. And you can see now that the nulls are aligned properly. Let me take my sun and make it smaller, and there you go. Now we have both our render and our 3D data which align properly. So the last stage is to go and add a few composite elements to this. So let's go and add some text. So I'm going to go to my new layer, add some text, and let's type cupboard. Fantastic. And I need to make this into a 3D layer. So toggle that little button, activate 3D, and we need to align this to, let's say, solid 2. So pick whip from your cupboard to solid 2. Do the same thing to align all the orientations and positions. Go and zero everything out, and we can play with the scale a bit, and I'm just going to click here and drag down until it gets small enough. Scrub a bit so we can go closer and see what's going on, and again I'm going to scale it down. I'm going to move it over a bit. Just use that little arrow, move it that way and move it that way, maybe scale it ever so slightly more, and now we have that text which is stuck on the cupboard. And you can do this with any other element you want. Now let's go and add the flare as well, and I'm going to save just to make sure that nothing happens. Because GPU is involved in these operations, there's always a chance you may get a crash in After Effects because of driver issues and whatnot. So make sure you save often so you don't lose the work you've done. And with the magic of editing, I just saved a new file, and let's go and add a lens flare. Now in order to add a lens flare, I need to use a solid. And I'm just going to make it quite big. I'm going to make it red for now. I'm going to call this flares, or flare anyway. Press OK, make it a 3D null, and then I'm going to parent it to the sun, and I'm going to go here and zero out all the transformations. So anchor point 0, 0, and position 0, 0, 0. Press enter, and you can see it's over there. And because I don't remember how big it was, I think I need to move the anchor point about 1500 and 1500, so everything's in the center. I can make this smaller or larger, but you will see why we need it to be larger. Now I'm going to use Video Copilot's optical flares, but you can use any effect you want. So let me go to my effect, Video Copilot, optical flares, and it's going to add some sort of flare. And let's see what's going on here. You can see the flare is somewhere up there. I'm going to put this at 0 and 0. Oh, it goes to the top left. Maybe I need to put the center position to 0 and 0 as well, and put this at, and you can see now we have this very obscure view. That's not going to help us terribly, but I think if I put this at minus 1500 and minus 1500, that may bring it right to the middle or something like that. Now, one thing you need to remember is that we cannot generate 3D flares. A flare, the tail of the flare, is an effect that is defined by what the camera is looking at. It's a lens effect. So you will not be able to bake these 3D effects inside your render. It just doesn't make sense. If you do want to add all sorts of weird lens effects, you need to do that in a real-time engine on top of your footage. So as far as the 3D rendered footage is concerned, you need to make everything in 2D in a flat plane. Now, you can always trick it by doing all sorts of things if you're creating a stereo 360 image, but that is a topic for another video because I will expand on this subject. Now, I see that I have a problem defining where I want everything to be because this plane is too big and I'm viewing the scene from a very particular angle. So what I'm going to do is just make sure the solid is a bit smaller. So I'm going to make it 500 by 500. And here now I have a better view of what's going on. So I can move this now this way. So minus 500 and minus 500. Where's my flare? Maybe I need to make this even smaller. So let me scale it down. So I'm going to go to scale here and scale it down. There you go. So now I want to find where the center of my flare is. It's up there, and there you go. I had to go the other way around. So let's go to, is that 256? Yep, and 256. Yep, that's correct. Now, the reason I made this big is I wanted to have a lot of area to mask properly. So I can scale this up, press Shift to constrain it, and then go to my scaling and bring it in a bit. There you go. So this is my flare now. There it is. And I need the center to be at the same point because I don't want this little artifact over here. So 256 and 256 is the center. So everything is going to be centered over here. Fantastic. Now, the last thing I need to do is make sure that if I'm doing any overlays, I need to put this on transparent. Now, for some reason, the VR compositing tools don't work nicely when we use all sort of transfer layers. So if I start using things like screen and so forth, things that are odd happen. So for flares and stuff like that, I would say just put it on transparent. And if I work these out with some help from Adobe and find out why these things are happening, I will let you know. But anyhow, now we have our lens flare stuck to that point. We have our text stuck to the cupboard. And pretty much now everything is finished. Now, if you want to see how this is going to look when we render it, you just go to the Open Output Render, and it's going to do some processing for a few seconds, and it's going to show us the final result in proper rendered format. This is called in equirectangular. Equirectangular. Okay. Now, a couple of things. You can see that we have these artifacts here because the cupboard here is in front of the text. Now, I was testing a way to bring in some object buffers because I've created some object buffers over here, right over there. But for some odd reason, where's my object buffer? Here it is. But for some odd reason, I was having problems, and my problems were mainly transfer function problems. So again, we will leave this for another tutorial once I figure out exactly what's going on. And now I switched my composition, and this is what happened. Anyway, just click on Edit, and this will refresh things. Try not to navigate over here, but navigate from here for good measure. But yes, if you now go to your output render, and you output this in any kind of movie format, and you view it through your goggles, everything is going to work fine. A very important thing I forgot to tell you is that in order for the render to work properly, you need to reorient. So you need to make sure that in the edit, the reorient is activated, and then we're going to output the render properly. I do hope you found this enlightening, and it will allow you to do new things and create amazing new stuff. And expect an expansion to this series because I think there are many things we can look into in terms of 360 and VR in general. So post any questions, any concerns, any special cases you found. Just post on Twitter, tag me, Maxon, and Cineversity. Thanks for watching.